The night Maya was born, a violent storm tore through their small Georgia town of Willow Creek, ripping ancient oak trees from the ground and leaving destruction in its wake. St. Mary's Hospital stood resolute against the howling winds, its white walls a beacon of stability amid nature's fury. As lightning split the sky like a jagged wound, Gloria Robinson gripped her newborn daughter, her dark brown hands trembling with a mixture of exhaustion and something deeper, a profound sense of anticipation. The delivery room had fallen strangely silent the moment Maya entered the world. The usual bustle of nurses and doctors seemed to pause, as if holding their collective breath. Dr. Elizabeth Grayson, a seasoned physician with 30 years of experience, felt an inexplicable shiver run down her spine. There was something different about this child, a subtle energy that seemed to vibrate just beyond the edges of normal perception. Gloria knew this before anyone else. Her family carried stories passed down through generations, tales of women with extraordinary gifts, of intuition that bordered on the mystical. Her own grandmother had spoken of such things in hushed tones, warning that some bloodlines carried more than just shared features. They carried memories, warnings, and connections that defied logical explanation. The storm outside mirrored the tempest of emotions within Gloria's heart. Maya's father, Robert, sat quietly in the corner, his postal worker's uniform still damp from the rain. He watched his wife and daughter with a mixture of love and something closer to apprehension. The Robinson family had always valued stability, predictability, and this moment felt like anything but. By age 6, Maya had transformed from a quiet baby into a child who seemed perpetually out of sync with the world around her. Her classroom teachers noted her unusual awareness, how she would sometimes look at a person and seem to see far beyond their physical presence. During recess, while other children chased each other and played tag, Maya would sit beneath the old magnolia tree, her eyes distant, her small fingers tracing invisible patterns in the dirt. The whispers began subtly. At first, they were fragments, snippets of conversations that seemed to drift through walls, echoes of events long past. Maya learned quickly not to mention these to others. The looks of confusion from her parents, the concerned glances of her teachers, taught her that her experiences were not something to be shared openly. Her grandmother, Nana Rose, was different. A woman with skin like polished mahogany and eyes that seemed to hold entire universes, she understood. During their weekend visits, when Robert and Gloria would be busy with work and chores, Nana Rose would sit Maya down in her sun-filled kitchen, surrounded by jars of homemade preserves and bundles of dried herbs. Some gifts, she would say, her fingers tracing ancient patterns on Maya's palm, are both a blessing and a burden. The words carried weight, a significance that Maya was too young to fully comprehend but old enough to feel deeply. The house on Maple Street became more than just a home. To Maya, it was a living entity breathing with stories and secrets. The wooden floorboards would creak with memories, the walls seemed to whisper histories that predated her own existence. She discovered she could hear conversations that had happened years ago, faint echoes of arguments, moments of joy, painful revelations that seemed trapped within the very structure of the house. Most children feared the dark. Maya feared the silence, because in that silence, the world spoke its most profound truths. Her bedroom, with its pale yellow walls and handmade quilt, became a sanctuary and a battleground. Here, the whispers were loudest, most insistent. Fragments of conversations, echoes of past events, secrets that seemed to pulse with an energy beyond normal understanding. Something was coming. Maya didn't know what, but the whispers promised a journey that would transform not just her life, but the lives of everyone connected to her. Douglas High School stood as a testament to resilience, its red brick walls holding stories of generations of Black students who had fought for their education. Maya Robinson walked its hallways like a live wire, her intelligence crackling with an intensity that both attracted and intimidated her peers. By her sophomore year, she had become something of an anomaly, a student who didn't just excel academically, but who seemed to see through the very fabric of the educational system. Her English teacher, Ms. Juilliard, recognized the spark first. During a unit on African American literature, Maya's essay on James Baldwin's The Fire Next Time was so profound that Ms. Juilliard kept her after class, her hands trembling slightly as she read the paper. "This isn't just an essay," she whispered, "this is a manifesto." The paper explored the generational trauma of racial inequality, weaving personal family stories with broader historical context. Maya had drawn connections that most seasoned academics would struggle to articulate, but it was more than just her intellectual prowess. Something in her writing suggested she knew things, deep, uncomfortable truths that seemed to come from somewhere beyond books or classroom discussions. Word of the essay spread quickly. Local civil rights activists took notice. The local newspaper requested a copy, but not everyone celebrated Maya's voice. An anonymous threat arrived, slipped between the pages of her history textbook, a crude note cut from newspaper letters warning her to stay quiet or face consequences. Her mother, Gloria, found the note first. The look of fear in her eyes was fleeting but unmistakable. That night, hushed conversations drifted through the house, conversations Maya wasn't meant to hear. But she heard everything. The real unraveling began on a crisp autumn morning when a stranger appeared at their doorstep. He was older, maybe in his 70s, with skin the color of weathered cedar and eyes that seemed to hold entire histories. Robert answered the door, his postal worker's stance immediately defensive. The conversation was brief, tense, punctuated by long silences. Later that day, Maya found a photograph slipped into her backpack. An old black and white image, slightly worn at the edges, showing a group of young activists from the 1960s. In the center stood a woman who looked hauntingly familiar, her features a mirror of Maya's own, but from another time. The man had been her biological father's cousin, a detail dropped casually but loaded with implications. He spoke of a family history far more complex than the neat narrative Maya had grown up believing. Whispers of activism, of a resistance movement that ran deeper than most could imagine. Her raised father, Robert, had known about this all along. School became a different landscape after that. Maya's already keen perception sharpened. The whispers she'd heard as a child became more insistent, more specific. During a class discussion about the civil rights movement, she found herself completing her teacher's sentences, offering details about events that weren't in any textbook. Her best friend, Zara, was the only one who didn't look at her like she was strange. "It's like you've got an entire library in your head," Zara would say, her voice a mixture of awe and concern. But Maya knew it was more than that. The information didn't just come from research or reading. It felt like memory. Deep, cellular memory that predated her own existence. The photograph became her obsession. At night, she would trace the faces of the activists, feeling a connection that defied logic. Her grandmother, Nana Rose, had always told her that some gifts skip generations, that some truths are carried in blood and bone. By the end of her sophomore year, Maya understood something fundamental. Her life was not her own. It was a continuation of a story much larger than herself. A narrative of resistance, of survival, of a legacy that demanded to be acknowledged. The whispers were getting louder, and Maya was finally ready to listen. Howard University felt like more than an institution. It was a crucible of Black excellence, a sanctuary where Maya's most profound transformations would take root. From the moment she stepped onto the historic campus, she understood this was not just about education, but about continuation of a legacy. Her first-year research project began innocently enough. A deep dive into educational funding disparities quickly transformed into something far more revolutionary. Maya's methodology was unlike any her professors had seen. She didn't just collect data, she seemed to unearth hidden narratives buried within spreadsheets and institutional records. Dr. Marcus Halling, the department's most respected sociologist, watched her with a mixture of fascination and concern. During one late-night research session, he found Maya cross-referencing funding documents from 3 different decades, her fingers moving with a rhythmic intensity that suggested she was doing more than simple academic work. "How did you find these connections?" he asked, pointing to a series of annotated documents that revealed systemic funding inequities spanning generations. Maya's response was cryptic. "Sometimes," she said, her eyes distant, "information finds you if you're willing to listen." The research became a thunderbolt. Her findings exposed a complex web of educational discrimination that went far beyond simple budget allocations. She mapped how school funding in predominantly Black districts had been strategically manipulated, creating educational deserts that perpetuated generational poverty. National education journals wanted the paper. Civil rights organizations saw it as potential legal ammunition, but the university administration saw something else entirely, a potential liability that threatened their carefully maintained relationships with funding bodies. The pushback was swift and calculated. Anonymous emails began to circulate, questioning her research methodology. Subtle attempts to discredit her work emerged from unexpected quarters. Maya realized she had struck a nerve far more significant than a typical undergraduate research project. During a heated departmental meeting, Dean Elizabeth Crawford tried to suppress the publication. The data could be interpreted differently, she argued, her voice tight with controlled anger. Maya stood her ground. Interpretation is a choice, she responded, her voice steady. And right now I choose truth. The confrontation became legendary among students. Recordings of the meeting circulated through campus networks, transforming Maya into something of an unexpected icon. Student activists rallied around her, seeing in her work a blueprint for systemic challenge. But the most profound revelation came unexpectedly. While digging through archived documents related to her research, Maya discovered a folder that didn't belong in the university archives. Tucked between mundane budget reports was a collection of letters dating back to the 1960s, correspondence that suggested a direct connection between her family and a little-known civil rights movement. The letters spoke of a resistance network far more complex than historical narratives suggested. Names were redacted, locations obscured, but the passion burned through every carefully typed page, and woven throughout the documents was a recurring name that made Maya's heart race. Rosa Mathis, the woman from the photograph she'd received years ago. Her grandmother's cryptic warnings began to make sense. Some stories, Nana Rose would say, are carried in blood, not just in books. The university's threat of expulsion became almost secondary to Maya's growing understanding. This was no longer just about an academic paper. This was about uncovering a hidden history, about giving voice to silenced narratives. As winter settled over the Howard campus, Maya understood that her journey had shifted. She was no longer just a student. She was a conduit, for stories untold, for truths long suppressed, and she was just beginning to understand the full magnitude of what that meant. The invitation arrived on cream-colored stationery, embossed with a deceptively simple logo that seemed to shimmer slightly when viewed from different angles. The Global Equity Research Foundation offered Maya a position that looked, on paper, like the opportunity of a lifetime. A six-figure salary, complete research autonomy, and a mandate to investigate systemic inequalities across multiple continents. Her mentor, Dr. Marcus Halling, was the first to express reservations. Sometimes he warned, his weathered hands tracing the edge of the invitation, an open door is just another way to control the narrative. Maya's instincts were already humming. The whispers that had followed her since childhood grew more insistent. During the interview process, she noticed subtle inconsistencies, documents that didn't quite align, conversations that seemed carefully choreographed. The Foundation's lead researcher, Dr. Elena Rodriguez, watched her with an intensity that felt more like an assessment than genuine interest. The first red flag came during her preliminary research assignment. The data sets she was given seemed meticulously curated, with specific narratives already subtly embedded. When Maya began to dig deeper, to challenge the underlying assumptions, the resistance was immediate and calculated. "We're looking for solutions, not endless deconstruction," Dr. Rodriguez told her during a tense meeting. The words were professional, but the underlying message was clear: stay within the prescribed boundaries. But Maya Robinson had never been good at staying within boundaries. Her breakthrough came through an unexpected channel. Late one night, while cross-referencing seemingly unrelated documents, she discovered a pattern. The Foundation wasn't just collecting research, they were strategically manipulating narratives about global inequality. Certain stories were being amplified, others systematically suppressed. An encrypted file, accidentally left open on a shared drive, revealed something more shocking. The Foundation had direct connections to several multinational corporations with histories of exploitative practices. They weren't just studying inequality, they were actively managing its perception. The whispers she'd heard since childhood became a roar. Fragments of conversations, historical connections, suppressed truths, they all seemed to converge in this moment. Her grandmother's words echoed in her mind: Some truths are weapons. Some stories are meant to be unleashed, not contained. Maya knew she was at a crossroads. Exposing the foundation would come at a significant personal and professional cost, but staying silent was never an option. An underground network of activists reached out first. They called themselves the Collective, a decentralized group of researchers, journalists, and community organizers who had been tracking the Foundation's activities for years. Their communication was careful, encrypted, operating in the shadows of traditional information channels. "We've been waiting for someone like you," their first message read. It was signed simply with a symbol, an intricate design that looked like a combination of a key and a tree root. The personal cost became immediate. Her research credentials were quietly challenged. Professional contacts began to distance themselves. The Foundation's reach was more extensive than she had initially understood. Her mother, Gloria, became her unexpected ally. During a late-night conversation, Gloria revealed fragments of her own hidden past, connections to activist networks that had operated beneath the radar for decades. "Some battles," Gloria told her, her voice a mixture of pride and concern, "are fought in the light. Some are fought in the spaces between what people can see." By the time winter settled over the city, Maya understood that she was no longer just a researcher. She had become a conduit for a much larger story, a story of resistance, of hidden truths, of systemic challenges that went far beyond any single institution. The Foundation had chosen her, believing they could control her narrative. They were about to learn how profoundly wrong they were. The diagnosis arrived like a thunderclap on a cloudless day. Genetic markers that suggested a complex, rare condition running through the Robinson family bloodline, a medical mystery that defied simple explanation. Gloria's health began to deteriorate in ways that medical science struggled to comprehend, her body becoming a living archive of familial secrets. Dr. Elena Rodriguez reappeared unexpectedly, this time not as a professional adversary, but as a key to understanding the medical enigma that was consuming Maya's family. Her expertise in genetic research went far beyond traditional medical practice, hinting at a deeper connection that Maya was only beginning to unravel. "Your family," Elena told her during one late-night consultation, "carries more than just genetic information. It's like your DNA is a complex narrative, each mutation a story waiting to be told." The hospital became Maya's new research ground. She dove into medical records, genetic databases, tracing the intricate web of her family's medical history. What she discovered was far more than a simple genetic condition. The Robinson family carried a unique genetic marker that seemed to defy conventional understanding, a biological record of resistance, of survival against impossible odds. Her mother's illness became a portal to understanding something profound about inheritance. Gloria's body was breaking down, but her spirit remained unbroken. During long nights at the hospital, she would share fragments of family history that she had never spoken about before. "Some gifts," Gloria would say, echoing the words of Nana Rose, "come with a price." The connection with Elena deepened beyond professional boundaries. She was more than a researcher, more than a potential romantic partner. Elena understood something fundamental about Maya's journey, the way some stories are carried in blood, in memory, in the very essence of genetic inheritance. Their relationship was a complex dance of intellectual passion and personal connection. Elena brought her own history of resistance, a family that had survived political persecution in Argentina, a lineage of activists who understood the power of hidden narratives. Maya discovered that her mother's condition was linked to a generations-long exposure to environmental factors deliberately concealed by corporate interests. The same networks she had been investigating were connected to her family's medical mystery. The Collective, the underground network of activists, provided crucial support. They connected Maya with researchers and medical professionals who operated outside traditional institutional frameworks. Old medical records, suppressed research documents, fragments of scientific investigations that had been deliberately buried began to surface. Her grandmother's cryptic warnings took on new meaning. The whispers Maya had heard since childhood were not just random echoes. They were biological memories, genetic warnings passed down through generations. During one particularly challenging treatment, Gloria revealed a secret that changed everything. Maya was not just the daughter of Robert and Gloria Robinson. Her biological lineage was far more complex, connected to a network of activists who had been fighting systemic oppression for decades. "You are a continuation," Gloria whispered, her hand gripping Maya's with surprising strength. "Not just of our family, but of a resistance that goes beyond blood." The medical journey became a descent into a labyrinth of family secrets. Each treatment, each genetic test, unveiled layers of a complicated history that connected Maya to a broader narrative of survival and resilience. Elena's research suggested that the genetic marker in the Robinson family was more than a medical anomaly. It was a biological record of resistance, a genetic memory of survival that had been passed down through generations. As winter turned to spring, Maya understood that her mother's illness was more than a personal tragedy. It was a revelation, a way of understanding how trauma, resistance, and hope could be carried in the most fundamental building blocks of human existence. The fractures were becoming a form of healing, and Maya was learning to read the language of her own inheritance. The Mathis Robinson Foundation emerged not from a traditional boardroom, but from a series of late-night conversations in Elena's cluttered home office. Surrounded by genetic maps, historical documents, and cutting-edge technology, Maya transformed her research into a revolutionary approach to educational and social equity. Their model was unlike anything the nonprofit world had seen. Instead of traditional scholarships, they created adaptive support networks that addressed the complex intersections of systemic inequality. Advanced algorithms developed by Elena tracked educational opportunities, identifying not just financial barriers, but the intricate social and psychological challenges faced by young Black women. The Foundation's first major initiative targeted what they called opportunity deserts, educational ecosystems so deeply compromised that traditional interventions barely made a ripple. Maya's research had uncovered something profound. Inequality was not just about money, but about entire systems of suppression that operated with surgical precision. Their technology was revolutionary. A mobile application developed by the Foundation used machine learning to create personalized support strategies. It didn't just provide financial aid, it offered mentorship, psychological support, and predictive interventions that could identify and address potential barriers before they became insurmountable challenges. Powerful interests began to take notice, and not all of that attention was welcome. Anonymous attempts to discredit the Foundation's work began to emerge. Subtle digital attacks targeted their research databases. Professional networks started to whisper about the Foundation's radical approach. Dr. Marcus Halling, now a senior advisor to the Foundation, warned Maya about the potential backlash. "When you start to redesign systems," he told her during a strategy meeting, "the systems will always push back." The collective, the underground network of activists, became their unexpected allies. Information would flow through encrypted channels, warning of potential challenges, providing insider insights that traditional research networks could never access. Their breakthrough came with a pilot program in 5 major urban centers. By combining genetic research, educational data, and community-driven approaches, they created support networks that seemed to anticipate challenges before they could fully form. Young women who had been statistically predicted to drop out were now not just surviving, but thriving. Elena's genetic research played a crucial role. They discovered that trauma and systemic oppression could be tracked through biological markers, a scientific validation of the generational experiences Maya's family had always understood intuitively. The Foundation's board meetings were anything but traditional. Held in secure locations, often with participants joining through encrypted channels, they resembled more of a strategic resistance movement than a typical nonprofit governance structure. Maya's mother, still battling her complex medical condition, became an unexpected source of strategic insight. Despite her physical challenges, Gloria's understanding of systemic resistance remained sharp. She would spend hours with Maya and Elena, sharing stories that bridged historical struggles with contemporary challenges. "You're not just providing opportunities," Gloria would say, her voice a mixture of pride and determination. "You're rewriting the entire narrative of survival." The Foundation's work began to attract international attention. Researchers from global South countries reached out, seeing in their model a potential blueprint for challenging deeply entrenched systems of inequality. But with visibility came increased scrutiny. The same corporate and institutional networks that Maya had previously exposed began to mount more sophisticated challenges. Attempts to discredit their research became more nuanced, more strategically designed to undermine their credibility. During a critical presentation to potential global partners, Maya realized something fundamental. This was no longer just about research or even social justice. This was about reimagining how social change could happen, not through traditional top-down approaches, but through deeply networked, adaptive strategies that could evolve as quickly as the systems of oppression they were challenging. The whispers that had followed her since childhood had transformed into a powerful, collective voice, and Maya was learning to amplify that voice in ways no one could have predicted. The package arrived on Maya's 40th birthday, wrapped in brown paper that seemed to carry the weight of decades. No return address, no postal markings, just her name written in a familiar handwriting that tugged at the edges of her memory. Her grandmother Nana Rose's script, though Nana had been gone for years. Inside, a collection of documents that would rewrite everything Maya thought she knew about her family's history. Coded letters, photographs with cryptic annotations, a collection of encrypted journals that seemed to span multiple generations. The collective had been right. Her family's story was far more complex than she had ever imagined. The first document that caught her eye was a detailed map. Not a geographical map, but an intricate network diagram connecting activists, resistance fighters, and underground movement leaders spanning from the 1940s to the present day. And at the center of this web, a name that made her breath catch, Rosa Mathis, the woman from the photograph she discovered years ago. Elena helped her begin the process of decoding the documents. Their work became an intimate dance of discovery, with Elena's genetic research providing context to the historical narratives they were uncovering. Each decoded message revealed layers of a resistance movement that had operated in the shadows for generations. One document in particular stood out, a manifesto written by Rosa Mathis during the height of the civil rights movement, detailing a network of activists who understood that true change would require more than public demonstrations. They were building a long-term strategy of institutional transformation, passing knowledge and resistance tactics from generation to generation. Maya's mother, Gloria, became a crucial interpreter. Despite her ongoing health challenges, her mind remained sharp, her memories a living bridge to this hidden history. She revealed that the Robinson family had been part of a sophisticated underground network for decades, not just activists, but strategic architects of social change. "We were never just fighting," Gloria told her during one of their late-night conversations. "We were planting seeds that would grow long after we were gone." The whispers Maya had heard since childhood took on new meaning. They weren't just random echoes. They were a sophisticated communication network, a way of passing critical information across generations. Her unique ability to perceive these whispers was not a mere coincidence, but a carefully cultivated skill passed down through her family. Elena's research revealed something even more profound. The genetic markers they had been studying were more than just a medical curiosity. They were a form of biological memory, a way of encoding resistance and survival strategies into the very DNA of the family. The collective provided additional context. Through encrypted communications, they shared additional fragments of the Robinson family's hidden history. Maya learned of her great-grandmother's work in creating underground education networks during the most oppressive periods of racial segregation, of her grandfather's role in developing communication networks that predated modern technology. Each revelation was a piece of a much larger puzzle. Maya understood now that her foundation, her work, her entire life's trajectory was not just her own choice, it was a continuation of a multi-generational strategy of resistance and transformation. The most shocking discovery came in the final document, a detailed plan written decades ago that seemed to predict the exact work Maya was doing now. Strategies for technological intervention, approaches to systemic change that were decades ahead of their time. It was as if her ancestors had been preparing her entire life for this moment. Some legacies, Elena said, tracing the lines of the old document, are not inherited, they're architected. As the winter light filtered through her study, Maya realized that the whispers she had heard her entire life were more than just memories. They were a message, a call to continue a fight that had been ongoing for generations. Her work was not just her own. It was a bridge between past troubles and future possibilities. The ghosts of her family were not just watching, they were guiding her. The Global Equity Summit was more than a conference, it was a crucible of possibility. Held in a convention center that seemed to pulse with collective potential, Maya Robinson stood at the podium, no longer just a researcher or an activist, but a living bridge between past struggles and future transformations. Her presentation was unlike anything the attendees had ever experienced. Instead of a traditional keynote, Maya had orchestrated a live, global demonstration of interconnected resistance. Screens around the massive hall flickered to life, showing real-time connections with activists, researchers, and community leaders from 6 continents. The technology developed by the Mathis Robinson Foundation transformed the entire space. Interactive data visualizations mapped systemic inequalities in real time, showing not just problems, but adaptive solutions. Each participant's device became a node in a global network, transforming passive attendance into active participation. Elena stood at the back of the hall, monitoring the technological infrastructure, her presence a testament to their years of collaborative work. Gloria, despite her ongoing health challenges, watched via a secure video link, her eyes bright with a mixture of pride and anticipation. Maya's presentation wasn't just a speech, it was a living, breathing demonstration of generational resistance. She revealed the full extent of her family's hidden history, the underground networks that have been fighting systemic oppression for decades. The coded documents, the genetic research, the intricate communication networks, all of it came together in a narrative that defied traditional understanding. "We are not just studying inequality," Maya told the stunned audience. "We are dismantling the very systems that create it." The whispers she had heard since childhood became a collective roar. Every piece of her journey, the mysterious childhood perceptions, the hidden family histories, the genetic markers of resistance, converged in this moment. The collective, the underground network that had supported her journey, had prepared for this moment. Encrypted communications began to flow, revealing parallel resistance efforts that had been operating in the shadows for generations. Maya was not just presenting research, she was unveiling a global, multigenerational strategy of transformation. Powerful interests in the audience began to shift uncomfortably. Corporate representatives, government officials, institutional leaders, all found themselves confronted with a level of transparency and interconnectedness they had never imagined possible. Dr. Marcus Halling, now a senior advisor to the foundation, watched from the wings. He understood the true significance of what Maya was accomplishing. This was not just about revealing information, it was about fundamentally reimagining how social change could happen. As the presentation reached its climax, something extraordinary occurred. The technology developed by the foundation began to create spontaneous connections. Activists from conflict zones, researchers from underfunded institutions, community leaders from marginalized regions, all found themselves suddenly, unexpectedly connected. Maya's genetic research played a crucial role. The understanding of how trauma and resistance could be tracked through biological markers provided a scientific framework for what her family had always understood intuitively. Each connection was more than digital, it was a form of collective healing. The final revelation came unexpectedly. Maya shared the complete, decoded documents from her family's hidden archive, a comprehensive strategy for systemic transformation that had been developed over generations. It wasn't just a historical document, it was a living blueprint for future resistance. As the session concluded, the entire hall seemed to vibrate with a new kind of energy. Maya understood something fundamental in that moment. Her life was not just her own story, it was a continuation of a profound, multigenerational narrative of resistance, hope, and transformation. The whispers that had followed her since childhood had become a global chorus, and Maya Robinson was its conductor. Outside the convention center, as the first light of dawn broke, something fundamental had shifted. The world would never be the same again.